All right, good morning, CAD 255. Hope you guys are doing well. All right, so we are gonna, I talked about assemblies last week, and we will get into assemblies, but I think we're gonna do that tomorrow. I just wanted to go over another kind of thing we're working towards at the same time as we're, figuring out how SolidWorks works. Um, a lot of you will probably want to take the CSWA at some point. And even if you don't, um, the the pathway for preparing for the CSWA is a great pathway just to learn SolidWorks in general, even if you don't want to take the test. Um, so the way SolidWorks does their test, we have several examples, and we will practice examples like test questions along the way so that you become familiar and practiced with the workflow of setting up the drawing and going through a checklist of things to make sure you're doing things in an efficient order, basically. So if we're looking at the assignment, it's called CSWA Practice 1. When you click that, there's going to be two parts in there. So we'll go ahead and click on the first one. So we've got our lesson here. You can click Get Started. I usually press this while I'm doing the part, while I'm modeling the part. I'll use the printer-friendly version. Get Started is kind of cool though, because what it does is right here, once you finish your part and you get a mass, a weight for the part, you can type it in there and you can check it to see if it's correct. That might not make sense why you would do that. So I'm going to explain to you how mass comes into play in your drawings. So I'm going to click printer friendly because that's the way I like to work. So I've got my part drawing and I've got all the dimensions here. And the thing I want you to focus on first when you open up a drawing is this material or this information right here. So we've got the units, IPS. That's probably the most important thing when you're first setting up a drawing. If you start sketching and you're a little ways in and you're like, oh no, my units are incorrect, it's almost easier to start over because it'll scale all of your stuff down and you have to go and change every single dimension in every single sketch. And then the sketches they get kind of out of control. They'll do unexpected things when you change dimensions that drastically. So be very mindful that you're getting into the uh, right units first. And as you can see, mine is not in the right units. Mine is in millimeters, grams, and seconds. So we'll go IPS right there. Then I'm going to switch back to this. Okay. The material you could change at the end of the part, and that's fine. That's not as important as changing your units for sure. The density is there kind of as a backup to the material. So a lot of times when you switch to 1060 aluminum, it'll give you the density, and these they're always pretty right on. You can double check the density within the software, and I'll show you that right now. So if we go back to SolidWorks, the way we're going to change our material is right here. So you come over to the manager over here, right click, you say edit material. Okay, and the way it's organized is by, like, within metals. You have to know what kind of metal you're working with. So 1060 aluminum is nice because it tells you right in there it's an aluminum alloy. Sometimes they'll tell you a plastic, and you have to kind of hunt around and figure out which plastic it is. But in the beginning, it's usually steel or aluminum. So we're going to go to aluminum, we're going to go to 1060 alloy, and then over here we can see the density, and you can double check that your density of materials is the same, but it usually is. It's usually fine. But be careful, there's a bunch of different 1060s. Make sure you've got the correct 1060 alloy. And then we'll click apply and close. And then I just want to make sure, yeah, so we're good, 1060 aluminum alloy, we're good. Then you can go ahead and model your part as you would any other part that you've worked on so far. You'll use these dimensions, etc. Now the part weight, I'll explain to you. So if, and I'm going to use the pressure disc as my example on this. If I did any feature, if I made any feature just barely off, let's say, so for example, this hole was a little bit too small, my part weight is going to be a little bit high because there's extra material that's left in the part. If this radius is too big, it'll take off too much material, and so my part will be too light. Part weight is a really easy, very, very accurate way to determine if you drew your part correctly. That's why it's used to determine. So instead of going through and like when your test is graded in the CSWA and looking at every individual sketch and feature to see if you did it correctly, part weight is just, it's black and white. It's right there. So the tricky part then for you is if your part weight is off, you then have to go back and double check your sketch dimensions, your featured settings, all that stuff to change it in a way that hopefully gets your part weight more correct. And so in the part weight in Solid Professor, let me go back to that real quick. Oh, before I go back to that, where do you find your part weight? When you go to evaluate, you go to mass properties right here, and it will give you your mass right here. I have had the experience with students doing this that there are times when this value is only 2 decimals. So it'll display as, like in this one, it would display as 9.69 because it would round it up because it's above 5. Let's see. In the window in Solid Professor where you input your weight, I would put in 3 decimal points. I've come across a situation where a student has put in 2 decimal points and it said your part weight was wrong. The only thing we did was we changed this value to 3 decimal places instead of 2, and when we put in the 3 decimal places, the part weight was correct. So to save some time, just click Options, use Custom Settings, and go to 3 decimal places to get your part weight. You can copy and paste, or you can just remember that number, and then come back, Solid Professor, click Get Started, put your mass in here, check mass, and it'll let you know how close you are to that. So this is a perfect example of what you'll see on the CSWA, and it'll be that's how you're graded on the CSWA as well. So that's we're going to practice that from time to time. We'll have assignments, and then we'll come back and do a little CSWA practice, and hopefully by the time you take your CSWA, you'll have done. I have a lot of examples for the CSWA. I think I have 30 sample parts for you guys to work through. So that's going to be that for today. So there's 2 parts to work on, and let me know if I can help.